Welcome to Boring History, where we quietly travel back 2,000 years to uncover the secrets of how humans built one of the world's greatest wonders, the Great Wall of China. This story isn't about battles or emperors shouting orders, but about the silent strength, hidden techniques, and forgotten lives behind the wall's endless stones. 2,000 years ago, the Great Wall of China was not the endless stone monument that tourists walk upon today, but a colossal dream forged from necessity, labor, and suffering. When we look at the first keynote, the ancient labor force and harsh working conditions, it is important to imagine the scale of human effort required to carve, stack, and secure thousands of kilometers of wall across mountains, deserts, and valleys. This was not the task of machines or advanced technologies, but of human hands, animal strength, and the relentless will of rulers determined to protect their dynasties. The labor force was drawn from every corner of society, and the story of their toil is one of sacrifice, endurance, and forgotten lives that remain buried within the stones themselves. The majority of workers were peasants, farmers who had been forced into service when they could no longer pay their taxes or provide other contributions to the empire. Instead of working their fields, they were marched to distant construction sites where their days began before sunrise and ended long after darkness settled over the camp. Alongside them were convicts, soldiers, and even scholars who had fallen into disfavor with the court. For many, working on the wall was not only punishment but also a slow death sentence. They labored with crude tools, shovels, picks, baskets for carrying earth, and with their bare hands moving earth, rocks, and timber to raise barriers that would stretch across impossible landscapes. The work was grueling, demanding not just physical energy, but also unshakable endurance in the face of exhaustion, hunger, and extreme climates. Conditions on the work sites were brutal. The wall traversed mountains where icy winds cut through workers' clothing in winter, and deserts where summer heat scorched the skin and dried their throats. Food was scarce, usually consisting of simple grains or gruel, barely enough to sustain their bodies for the heavy labor demanded of them. Fresh water was not always available, especially in desert regions, and workers often drank from stagnant pools or relied on rationed supplies carried in by caravans. Disease spread quickly in the camps where overcrowding, poor hygiene, and constant physical strain weakened immune systems. Small illnesses could quickly become fatal, and burial mounds grew near the wall as countless laborers succumbed to fatigue, hunger, or sickness. The empire viewed this labor force as expendable, and their sacrifices were often disregarded. Workers who died were sometimes buried within the foundation of the wall itself or left near construction sites. Their bodies blending into the earth, they had been forced to move. These silent graves became part of the structure's hidden history, and legends later arose about the wall being built with the bones of those who perished. While it may not have been intentional policy to bury the dead inside the wall, the image captures the reality of countless lives consumed by the project. Each brick, each packed layer of rammed earth represented days, months, or years of human struggle. Supervisors and soldiers enforced discipline with whips, threats, and executions. Workers who slowed down or attempted to flee faced brutal punishment. For many, there was no escape. Once taken to the site, they remained until their labor was complete, or until their bodies could give no more. These methods reflected the empire's reliance on fear to ensure progress. The rulers understood that the wall was not only a defense against invading nomads, but also a symbol of authority, and any delay was treated as disobedience against the throne itself. Harsh working conditions were therefore not simply the byproduct of difficult terrain, but a deliberate reflection of the empire's demand for absolute control and obedience. Despite the suffering, the workers displayed remarkable resilience. They developed techniques for carrying immense loads without carts, fashioning sledges and stretchers from wood and ropes. Human chains were formed to pass stones and buckets of earth from one to another, sometimes stretching for hundreds of meters up steep slopes. In some areas, oxen and horses were used to drag heavy blocks, but in many cases, manpower was the only option. This reliance on human strength pushed bodies to their limits, but it also demonstrated the collective determination of thousands of anonymous individuals whose combined efforts turned an imperial vision into reality. The sheer diversity of the labor force was striking. Farmers worked side by side with criminals, scholars, and soldiers. Each group brought different skills, but most had little knowledge of construction before they arrived. The empire provided minimal training, relying instead on repetition, observation, and brute force. Over time, workers became adept at their tasks, whether it was mixing lime for mortar, shaping wooden supports, or packing earth into wooden frames to create the rammed earth sections of the wall. Their knowledge was born out of survival and necessity, and although they never received recognition, their ingenuity played a vital role in ensuring progress. The environment itself was a constant enemy. In the deserts of northern China, sandstorms buried sections of the wall before they were completed, forcing workers to dig and rebuild repeatedly. In the mountains, landslides and collapsing slopes threatened to erase weeks of effort in a single moment. These natural challenges required the workers to adapt continuously, reinforcing foundations, creating drainage systems, and stabilizing slopes with wooden frames. Every setback meant more labor, more exhaustion, and more lives consumed by the unrelenting demands of construction. Yet the project persisted, driven by imperial decree and sustained by the endless supply of forced labor. What made the conditions harsher still was the isolation. Many of the wall's construction sites were located in remote regions, far from villages, markets, or any sense of community life. Workers lived in makeshift camps of tents or crude huts, exposed to the elements and constantly at risk of raids by nomadic tribes. Separation from their families was another form of punishment, as many never returned home. Letters or messages rarely reached loved ones, and for countless individuals, the wall became the place where their lives ended, far from familiar fields and villages. This isolation deepened the psychological toll, leaving workers with little hope and no sense of escape. While emperors and officials celebrated the wall as a symbol of unity and strength, the reality for those who built it was one of relentless hardship. Generations of workers passed their lives in its shadow, each day marked by back-breaking labor and uncertainty about whether they would live to see another sunrise. Some were driven by the faint hope of survival, others by sheer instinct, but most had no choice in the matter. The wall consumed not only their strength, but also their stories, erasing names and identities in the service of an empire's ambition. The labor force behind the Great Wall is often described in numbers, with estimates of hundreds of thousands, or even millions of workers, but numbers fail to capture the human dimension. Each individual carried stones, dug earth, and endured pain with the knowledge that their contribution would never be acknowledged. They were not remembered as heroes, nor were their sacrifices honored in records. Instead, their efforts were absorbed into the stones, becoming part of a structure that stood for power, security, and endurance, but also for the silent cost of human suffering. When we think about the Great Wall of China, it is tempting to imagine the endless grey bricks that snake across the mountains today. But 2,000 years ago, the techniques and materials used were far from uniform and evolved over centuries depending on geography, resources, and the knowledge available at the time. The ingenious construction techniques and the materials employed reflected not only the empire's ambition, but also the practical reality of building across deserts, plains, and towering mountain ranges. What made the wall extraordinary was not simply its scale, but the way workers adapted to the environment, using what was available locally and combining practical engineering with sheer human determination. These methods were far from simple. They reveal an advanced understanding of durability, resource management, and improvisation, which together allowed the wall to stand as a testament to human ingenuity. One of the earliest and most widely used techniques was rammed earth construction. In regions where stone or brick was scarce, workers relied on the soil beneath their feet, compacted layer by layer to form massive walls. They built wooden frames and filled them with layers of dirt, gravel, and clay, pounding each layer with wooden or metal rammers until it became as hard as rock. This process was labor-intensive, requiring constant movement of earth and repetitive pounding, but the result was remarkably durable. Some of these rammed earth sections have survived for over 2 millennia, their surfaces weathered, but their cores still intact. The use of rammed earth demonstrated a deep knowledge of local resources and an understanding of how compression and density could transform ordinary soil into a formidable barrier. For workers, however, the process meant endless cycles of carrying, pouring, and pounding, a rhythm that demanded both strength and endurance. In areas rich with stone, particularly in mountainous regions, builders employed cut stone blocks, stacking them with precision to create walls that could withstand both time and attack. Large stones formed the base, providing stability, while smaller stones filled gaps and leveled layers. Mortar was sometimes used, often made from lime or sticky rice mixtures, which added bonding strength and resistance to erosion. The use of stone not only ensured longevity, but also took advantage of natural terrain. Workers quarried rocks from nearby slopes, dragging them with ropes, sledges, or animal power. The process of shaping and moving these stones required significant coordination, as even a single misplaced block could destabilize a section of wall. The effort demonstrated a balance between brute force and careful craftsmanship, as each stone had to fit seamlessly with the next to create stability. Brick became a significant material during later dynasties, particularly under the Ming, when brick-making technology was refined and mass production became possible. Bricks offered advantages that rammed earth and stone could not. They were lighter, easier to handle, more uniform in size, and quicker to assemble into stable structures. Kilns were built near construction sites to produce the vast quantities needed, and workers stacked these bricks into outer layers while filling the inner core with rubble, earth, or stone fragments. This combination created a wall that was both strong and flexible, capable of withstanding not only military pressure, but also the test of time and weather. Bricks also allowed for greater architectural detail, enabling the addition of battlements, watchtowers, and pathways along the top of the wall. The transition to brick construction represented a leap forward in both efficiency and durability, though it still demanded endless hours of labor from the workers who fired, carried, and placed each individual brick. The techniques employed went beyond simple stacking or pounding of materials. Builders made use of terrain to reduce labor while enhancing strength. In mountainous regions, ridge lines were chosen as natural foundations, reducing the need for additional height and making it harder for invaders to climb. Valleys were filled with compacted earth or stone to create continuous barriers, while rivers were spanned with bridges or redirected to serve as natural defenses. In desert regions, where sand constantly threatened to erode structures, workers mixed layers of reeds, tamarisk branches, and gravel into the walls, binding the sand and slowing erosion. This kind of adaptation highlighted an acute awareness of environmental challenges and an ability to turn local landscapes into allies rather than obstacles. Drainage systems were another critical aspect of construction. Rainwater and snowmelt posed constant threats to the stability of walls built on steep or uneven ground. To counter this, workers constructed channels and outlets within the wall to allow water to escape, preventing erosion and collapse. Without these features, many sections would have washed away within years, but their survival across centuries demonstrates the effectiveness of these hidden engineering solutions. For the laborers, this meant not only building walls, but also digging trenches, carving stone channels, and ensuring that every section of wall accounted for the forces of nature as much as for human threats. Equally important were the watchtowers and fortresses integrated into the wall. These were not merely add-ons but essential elements of the construction process. Towers were placed at regular intervals, often within line of sight of each other, to serve as signaling points and defensive strongholds. Building them required additional materials and techniques, as they had to be taller, more durable, and capable of housing garrisons. Workers constructed towers with thicker walls, multiple floors, and narrow windows for archers. Fortresses at key passes were even more complex, resembling small walled cities with gates, barracks, and storage facilities. These structures demanded more advanced planning, combining architectural design with military strategy, and their construction required skilled laborers as well as forced workers. The towers and fortresses were built not only for immediate use, but as enduring symbols of vigilance and control. The logistical ingenuity behind construction was as remarkable as the physical techniques. Moving materials across vast distances required organized supply lines, coordinated labor groups, and makeshift roads. In some areas, workers created temporary pathways of logs or stones to drag heavy materials uphill, while in others, they formed human chains to pass loads from hand to hand. Oxen, horses, and donkeys were employed where possible, but in remote and rugged terrain, human labor remained the main driving force. The coordination required to maintain a steady flow of resources to multiple construction sites across hundreds of kilometers speaks to the Empire's ability to mobilize not only manpower, but also planning on an unprecedented scale. The construction also relied on a system of modular progress. Instead of building the wall in a continuous sweep, it was constructed in segments, each handled by separate labor groups. These segments were then joined together, creating a patchwork that eventually formed a continuous barrier. This approach allowed the Empire to maximize efficiency, but it also demanded strict organization and consistency. Workers in one section had to match their construction to those in adjacent areas, ensuring uniformity in height, thickness, and alignment. The ability to coordinate across such vast distances demonstrated both the administrative control of the Empire and the adaptability of the construction methods. Every choice of material and technique carried with it an understanding of longevity. Rammed earth was ideal in arid regions where rainfall was minimal, while stone resisted erosion in mountainous terrain, and brick offered resilience in wetter climates. These decisions reveal a pragmatic approach. The wall was not built according to a single blueprint, but adjusted continuously to meet the demands of geography and resources. What unifies these varied techniques is their shared reliance on human labor, transformed through repetitive effort into structures that transcended the limitations of their time. The wall's construction techniques also reveal something deeper about the Empire's priorities. Strength and durability were not the only goals. Psychological impact mattered as well. A towering wall of stone or brick sent a message of power to enemies and reassurance to subjects. The sheer scale and visibility of the wall were as important as its practical defensive value, and the techniques chosen ensured that it dominated the landscape. From a distance, even a relatively thin or short wall could appear impenetrable, its battlements silhouetted against the sky. For the workers, this meant their labor served not just physical defense, but also the projection of imperial authority. Over centuries, as dynasties rose and fell, techniques evolved further. Some rulers expanded existing walls, reinforcing them with new materials, while others built entirely new sections. Each phase left behind layers of construction history, visible today in the contrasts between rammed earth ruins and pristine brick battlements. The ingenuity of the builders lay not only in creating structures that lasted, but also in adapting old methods to new needs, ensuring continuity while embracing innovation. Their work, though often invisible in historical records, represents an unbroken chain of experimentation, adaptation, and resilience. The Great Wall of China is often described as a military barrier, a massive fortification meant to keep enemies out, but the true purpose of its construction stretched far beyond the simple notion of defense. To understand its strategic purpose, it is necessary to step into the mindset of emperors, generals, and administrators who saw the wall not just as a shield against nomadic invasions, but as a tool of political control, a marker of cultural identity, and an economic system woven into the daily life of the empire. Its significance lay not only in its ability to repel attackers, but in its role as a structure that shaped the landscape, dictated trade, and projected the authority of the dynasty across vast territories. The wall was as much a psychological weapon as it was a physical one, and its influence reached into every aspect of society. The most immediate strategic function of the wall was of course defense against the nomadic tribes of the north, particularly the Xiongnu during the early dynasties and later groups such as the Mongols. These tribes were skilled horsemen who relied on speed, mobility, and surprise attacks, making them difficult to fight using traditional Chinese infantry tactics. By constructing a physical barrier, the empire sought to slow their movements, limit their access to Chinese farmlands, and funnel invasions into predictable points where imperial armies could prepare defenses. The wall's placement along ridges, cliffs, and other difficult terrain amplified its defensive value, forcing invaders to navigate natural obstacles in addition to man-made ones. Yet the wall was never an impenetrable line. It could not stop all invasions. Its real value was in buying time, delaying enemies, and giving defenders the advantage of preparation. Even when breached, the wall served as an early warning system, signaling that enemies were approaching and allowing the empire to organize countermeasures. Just as significant was the wall's role in controlling trade and movement across the northern frontier. The wall was not a continuous, unbroken barrier in its earliest stages. It contained gates, passes, and checkpoints that served as controlled entry points between the empire and the steppe. Through these, officials could regulate the flow of goods, animals, and people. Trade with nomadic tribes was both essential and dangerous, bringing horses, furs, and livestock into Chinese markets, while also exposing the empire to potential infiltration. By channeling this trade through fortified gates, the empire ensured it could monitor interactions, collect taxes, and restrict smuggling. This system transformed the wall into not just a military fortification, but also a customs boundary, one that reinforced the empire's economic strength while reducing risks. The ability to tax trade at these points helped fund the empire's military and administrative expenses, making the wall a financial tool as much as a defensive one. The wall also served to project imperial authority into frontier regions. The northern borders of China were vast, remote, and difficult to govern, and without visible symbols of the emperor's power, loyalty could waver. The wall acted as a constant reminder of the dynasty's reach, a physical presence that declared ownership of the land and the people within it. Towers and fortresses built along the wall housed garrisons of soldiers and officials, turning the wall into a chain of military colonies. These outposts not only defended the empire, but also acted as instruments of governance, spreading imperial law, collecting tribute, and ensuring obedience. In this way, the wall was a tool for unifying diverse and far-flung regions under a single authority. The presence of the wall instilled order in areas that might otherwise drift into independence or align with nomadic powers, and its sheer size communicated the idea that resistance was futile. The wall's strategic purpose extended into psychological warfare. For enemies approaching from the north, the sight of a massive fortification stretching endlessly across the horizon was intimidating. Even when poorly manned or incomplete, the wall projected strength and permanence. It conveyed the message that the empire was organized, wealthy, and capable of mobilizing immense resources. For Chinese citizens within the wall, it served the opposite function, offering reassurance that the empire was protected and that their fields, villages, and cities were safe behind the barrier. The psychological effect was as important as the physical defense. The wall was meant to inspire confidence among allies and fear among enemies. In times when parts of the wall were neglected or allowed to crumble, the resulting sense of insecurity often had as much impact as an actual invasion, showing how deeply its presence was tied to the perception of stability. Another layer of strategic purpose was its role in organizing military logistics. The wall was not simply a wall, but a complex system of infrastructure. Roads ran along its length, connecting forts and garrisons. Towers at regular intervals allowed signals to be passed quickly using smoke, fire, or flags, creating one of the earliest long-distance communication networks in history. This system enabled rapid responses to threats, as warnings could travel hundreds of kilometers in hours rather than days. The wall thus functioned as a nervous system for the empire's military, allowing commanders to coordinate across vast distances and maintain surveillance over frontier activity. Without the wall's communication and transportation network, defending the northern frontier would have been far more chaotic and ineffective. Beyond military and economic concerns, the wall played a cultural and symbolic role that was deeply strategic in nature. It marked the boundary between what was considered the civilized world of China and the perceived chaos of the nomadic tribes beyond. By defining this boundary, the wall reinforced a sense of identity, separating those within its bounds as members of the empire, connected by shared laws, language, and traditions. This sense of belonging was important for unifying a diverse population spread across enormous territories. At the same time, it cast outsiders as perpetual threats, reinforcing the legitimacy of the emperor's authority to protect and defend. The wall thus became not only a military fortification, but also a cultural barrier, embodying the idea of China as a distinct and superior civilization surrounded by hostile outsiders. The wall's strategic purpose also involved colonization and settlement. By securing the northern frontier, it created space for Chinese farmers and settlers to move into previously contested lands. Fields could be cultivated, villages could grow, and the empire's population could expand under the protection of the wall. This expansion not only increased food production and economic strength, but also reduced the influence of nomadic tribes by pushing them further north and limiting their access to fertile lands. The wall, in this sense, was an instrument of expansion and assimilation, reshaping the demographic and cultural map of northern China. Each new section of wall brought with it new opportunities for settlement, reinforcing the empire's grip on its frontiers. Strategically, the wall also served as a tool of internal control. The sheer scale of the project required the mobilization of hundreds of thousands of workers, including peasants, prisoners, and soldiers. This massive labor force was not only about building the wall, but also about channeling potential unrest into controlled projects. By forcing people to work on the wall, emperors reduced the risk of rebellion, kept the population occupied, and demonstrated their ability to command absolute obedience. The wall was therefore a symbol of imperial dominance over its own people as much as over foreign enemies. The harsh conditions faced by workers were part of this broader system of control, ensuring that the empire's resources were directed toward monumental projects that reinforced its authority. The wall's strategic role evolved over time as dynasties rose and fell. Under some rulers, it was emphasized as a defensive necessity, while under others, it was neglected in favor of diplomacy or offensive campaigns. Yet regardless of its state, the idea of the wall remained powerful. Even when poorly maintained, it continued to serve as a psychological boundary and a symbol of imperial ambition. During periods of strong central control, the wall was expanded and reinforced, signaling confidence and dominance. During weaker periods, when parts of it crumbled, the loss of security highlighted the fragility of the dynasty. The wall thus acted as a barometer of the empire's strength, its condition reflecting the ability of rulers to project stability and control. The economic implications of its strategic purpose cannot be overlooked. By regulating trade and taxation at its gates, the wall tied borderlands into the broader imperial economy. Merchants who passed through its gates contributed wealth to the state, and the goods exchanged there helped fuel markets deep within China. At the same time, the wall prevented uncontrolled exchanges that might empower enemies or destabilize the economy. The balance between openness and restriction was carefully maintained, using the wall as both a barrier and a filter. In this way, it ensured that the empire benefited from contact with outsiders while minimizing risks, a delicate balance that contributed to the longevity of Chinese civilization. The cultural and historical legacy of the Great Wall of China stretches far beyond its original function as a barrier and military defense. Over the centuries, it has transformed into one of the most recognizable symbols of Chinese civilization, a monument that embodies resilience, sacrifice, ingenuity, and the idea of permanence in the face of time. Its legacy is not just preserved in stones, bricks, and earth, but also in the collective imagination of generations who have regarded it as both a source of pride and a reminder of the struggles endured by those who built it. The wall has become an inseparable part of China's identity, influencing culture, politics, art, literature, and even the way the nation has been perceived by the outside world. From the earliest times, Chinese culture has emphasized the harmony between humans and the landscape, and the Great Wall represents one of the most dramatic interactions between people and nature. Its serpentine path across mountains, deserts, and plains reflects a determination to shape the environment according to human will, turning geography into both ally and obstacle. This transformation of nature into a controlled and ordered structure symbolized the empire's ability to impose its authority upon the vastness of the land. For the people living within the wall's embrace, it was not only a boundary, but a defining landmark of their world, one that separated the safety of civilization from the uncertainty of the steppes beyond. Over generations, this perception embedded itself into the cultural consciousness, making the wall not just a construction, but a metaphor for security, endurance, and separation. Literature and folklore have preserved the wall's legacy in countless ways. Stories of the workers who died during its construction became part of popular tradition, most famously in the legend of Meng Jiangnu, whose tears for her husband who perished at the wall caused entire sections to collapse. This tale, passed down for centuries, reflected the human cost of the project and turned the wall into a symbol of both suffering and love. The story survived because it captured the tension between imperial ambition and individual hardship, reminding people that beneath the grandeur of stone lay countless personal tragedies. The endurance of such legends ensured that the wall was never seen merely as a triumph of rulers, but also as a testament to the sacrifices of ordinary people, whose anonymous lives were bound forever into its foundations. Poetry and art during imperial times often celebrated the wall as a marker of China's strength. Poets described it as an endless dragon lying across the mountains, a powerful image that merged natural majesty with human creation. Paintings depicted the wall as an inseparable part of the landscape, stretching into misty horizons, reinforcing its role as a cultural icon that bridged the natural and the man-made. Yet these depictions were not always celebratory. Many works also reflected melancholy, loneliness, and the sense of separation the wall imposed. For soldiers stationed in remote watchtowers, the wall symbolized exile and hardship, themes that poets explored to convey the isolation of frontier life. These cultural expressions deepened the wall's legacy, ensuring that it represented not only power and security, but also sorrow and endurance. The wall also became a central element in the way Chinese dynasties defined their legitimacy. Each ruler who expanded or reinforced the wall tied their legacy to it, using it to demonstrate their commitment to protecting the realm. The wall was thus both a political tool and a cultural symbol of continuity, linking successive dynasties through a shared project that transcended individual reigns. For the people, its existence served as proof of the empire's endurance, a visible reminder that despite wars, famines, and changes in leadership, the structure of the state remained unbroken. This sense of continuity was deeply cultural, shaping the way Chinese society viewed time and history as cycles of renewal anchored by enduring monuments. As centuries passed, the wall's military significance declined, but its symbolic power grew stronger. By the Ming Dynasty, when large sections were rebuilt with brick and stone, the wall was no longer only a defensive line, but also a grand statement of architectural mastery. Travelers and officials who visited the wall wrote accounts that marveled at its scale, describing it as something that could only have been built by the greatest of civilizations. This perception influenced not only domestic culture, but also the way China presented itself to outsiders. The wall came to embody the grandeur of the Middle Kingdom, reinforcing the belief that China was unique in its achievements and unmatched in its capacity to mobilize human effort for monumental projects. In modern times, the legacy of the Great Wall has only deepened, evolving into one of the most important cultural icons in the world. For the Chinese people, it has become a unifying symbol representing the strength of their heritage and the resilience of their ancestors. In times of national struggle, the wall has been invoked as a metaphor for perseverance, its stones seen as embodying the spirit of resistance against foreign invaders or internal collapse. During the 20th century, when China faced political upheavals and external threats, references to the wall became central to patriotic rhetoric, linking the endurance of the ancient structure to the survival of the nation itself. This transformation of the wall from a defensive fortification into a cultural emblem ensured its relevance long after its original military purpose had faded. The wall's global recognition further amplifies its cultural legacy. Foreign travelers, missionaries, and explorers who visited China often wrote about the wall as one of the wonders of the world. Their accounts introduced it to audiences far beyond China, turning it into a symbol not just of a nation, but of human ambition in general. The wall entered the imagination of people worldwide, inspiring comparisons with other monumental achievements like the pyramids of Egypt or the Colosseum of Rome. Its sheer length and endurance fascinated observers who saw in it both the greatness and the ruthlessness of human civilizations. In this way, the wall's cultural legacy transcended national boundaries, becoming part of the shared heritage of humanity. The legacy is also embedded in the way the wall has shaped tourism and identity in modern China. Millions of visitors from around the world come each year to walk along its battlements, climbing steep stone steps and gazing across mountains where the wall snakes endlessly into the distance. These visits reinforce the idea of the wall as a bridge between past and present, allowing people to physically connect with history while also experiencing its grandeur in person. For China, the wall has become a symbol of national pride, one that plays a central role in cultural diplomacy, appearing in films, art, and international events as an icon of Chinese civilization. It embodies a narrative of resilience and creativity that the nation continues to embrace as part of its modern identity. The Great Wall's legacy also lies in the countless lives that shaped it, though most remain anonymous. For centuries, workers, soldiers, and their families lived along its length, creating small communities that thrived under its shadow. These communities developed their own traditions, influenced by both Chinese culture and the nomadic tribes they interacted with across the frontier. Folklore, music, and customs from these frontier societies have carried traces of the wall's presence, embedding it into local identities as much as into the national consciousness. Even today, in villages near the wall, people tell stories passed down through generations about ancestors who labored, fought, or lived alongside its stones, ensuring that the wall's cultural imprint is not just a distant memory, but a living tradition. Another aspect of the legacy is the way the wall embodies the paradox of human achievement. It is a monument to both greatness and suffering, to vision and sacrifice. On one hand, it represents the ability of a civilization to organize vast resources and leave behind a structure that defies time. On the other hand, it carries within it the unspoken history of countless deaths, of forced labor, and of lives lost in the service of imperial ambition. This duality has made the wall a powerful cultural symbol, one that resonates not only with pride, but also with reflection. It forces people to consider the cost of greatness and the hidden stories behind monumental achievements. In this sense, its legacy is not one-dimensional but layered, encompassing triumph, sorrow, endurance, and reflection. The wall also continues to inspire artistic and cultural expression in modern times. It appears in literature, cinema, music, and visual art as a symbol of endurance, mystery, or even isolation. Writers and filmmakers use it to evoke themes of struggle and survival, while artists capture its vastness to reflect on humanity's relationship with nature. In education, it remains a central part of Chinese history lessons, taught as both a symbol of ancient achievement and a reminder of the sacrifices made. Its enduring presence in cultural imagination ensures that its legacy is continually renewed, adapted to different eras and perspectives without losing its essential meaning. In the broader history of civilization, the wall stands as a monument that links past and present. It represents the human desire to build barriers for protection, but also the unintended legacy that such structures leave behind. Unlike other monuments that serve a singular purpose, the Great Wall has lived many lives. Military fortification, economic checkpoint, cultural symbol, national icon, and global heritage site. Each of these layers contributes to its enduring significance, ensuring that it remains not just a relic of the past, but a living part of cultural memory.